Today, we're going to dig into something that affects millions of Americans, but we don't always talk about the real numbers, the actual hard dollar cost of starting a family. And we're going to do it by following the story of one family, one entrepreneur, to see the kind of financial pressure people are really under. So, let's get into it.
So let me just ask you straight up. Forget the national averages you might have heard. For one family in the year 2025, what do you think the actual out-of-pocket cost could be for a single birth? Just take a guess. What number pops into your head?
For one self-employed small business owner, the answer is $40,000. And to be clear, that's not what an insurance company gets billed. That is the cash they will pay out of their own pocket for the birth of their third child. It's a completely staggering number. And it just makes you ask, how on earth did we get here?
And look, this isn't some sudden shock. For this family, it's been a crisis building over time. You can see the trend right here. Their first kid, back in 2021, that cost them $30,000. The second, just 2 years later, was $35,000. And now their third, due in 2025, is projected to hit $40,000. I mean, that's a $10,000 jump in just 4 years. It's completely unsustainable.
So, how in the world does a bill like this even happen? Let's break down the math, because it's not just one big charge. Nope. It's a combination of relentless, overlapping expenses that just pile up until you hit this massive total.
All right, here's how you get to that $40,000 bill. First up, you've got the annual insurance premiums. We're talking over $25,000 a year. That's more than $2,000 every single month just to have the insurance. But wait, before that insurance even kicks in for anything major, the family has to pay a massive $14,000 deductible out of pocket. You add those two numbers together, and there you are, right at the $40,000 mark.
And you'd think, okay, 40 grand. That's insane. But that has to be it, right? Well, unbelievably, it's not. That's not even the full cost for this small business owner to simply participate in the system.
Yeah, on top of everything else, there's this hidden fee. See, to even get access to this kind of health plan as a small business, they have to use something called a professional employment organization, or PEO. And that service costs an extra $1,250 a month. Let that sink in. It's basically an administrative fee you pay for the privilege of buying their incredibly expensive insurance. So when you add it all up, the insurance, the deductible you have to pay, and these PEO fees, the true annual cost for this entrepreneur to have health coverage and have a baby is actually closer to $55,000. That's money that could have been a new employee's salary, money that could have been put back into growing the business, but instead, it's gone. So the most obvious question here is why? Why not just find a cheaper plan? I mean, come on. And the answer, well, it pulls back the curtain on a series of broken systems where it's shockingly easy for entrepreneurs and their families to just fall right through the cracks.
You know, for most people in America, health insurance comes from one of three main places. You either get it through a big company you work for, you buy it on the individual marketplace set up by the ACA, or you qualify for some kind of subsidized plan like Medicaid. These are the normal lanes, right?
But here's the problem. For a lot of small business owners, none of those options really work. They don't have a big employer to get a plan from. They often make too much money to qualify for subsidies. And the individual marketplace, well, it has a huge flaw if you're a family planning to have kids.
And here's the trap. It's a sneaky one. So the ACA says an insurer can't deny you coverage just because you're pregnant. That's great. But some insurers found a little loophole. Instead of denying the person, they just started offering plans that don't cover maternity care at all. So sure, you can buy their insurance, but it won't pay for the one thing you actually need it for, having a baby.
So what happens when you're stuck in this gap, when all the normal paths are blocked? You're left with what you could call the entrepreneur's dilemma. It's a series of just impossible choices. There are no good options here.
These are pretty much the only paths forward, and they all stink. Option 1, just pay the $55,000 and gut your business. 2, drop insurance completely and pray you don't have a medical emergency that bankrupts you. 3, switch to a cheaper plan but lose the doctors and hospitals you know and trust. Or 4 and 5, you completely change your life. The stay-at-home spouse has to get a corporate job just for the benefits, or the entrepreneur has to quit their dream and give up the business to go work for a big company. Every single choice is a massive sacrifice.
And you know, this doesn't just hurt one family, it ripples outward. That personal cost has a very real public consequence. As the business owner put it, that $55,000 isn't just money. It's a salary for an employee that now will never be hired. It literally stops job creation in its tracks.
Okay,
So let's zoom out. Because when you hear enough stories like this, you have to ask what it all means. What does it signal about our society as a whole when a fundamental act like starting a family becomes a luxury good?
What we're seeing here is this huge disconnect. On one hand, you have economists and data points saying, hey, the economy is strong, inflation is down. But on the other hand, you have the actual lived experience of millions of people who are saying, I can't afford to have a family. My essential costs are going through the roof. There's an old saying, when the data and the anecdotes disagree, the anecdotes are usually right. And that feeling of getting squeezed, that's real, no matter what a chart says.
And this brings us to a pretty stark warning. Because if the system's answer to people who are struggling is just, well, then you shouldn't have done that, you create a really dangerous situation. When a huge number of people feel like the system is rigged and offers them nothing worth protecting, they don't just want change, they might start wanting revenge.
But really, at its core, this is an existential issue. The ability for people to form families, to have kids, that's the foundation of any civilization. So when a society creates economic forces that make it this difficult to have children, it's pretty much making a choice about its own future. And that is a deeply, deeply troubling thought.
And that leaves us with one last question to think about. We've talked about the $40,000 or $55,000 cost, but the real price is much higher, isn't it? What really happens to a country, to its culture, when bringing a new child into the world becomes a luxury that only a few can truly afford? What is the real price we all pay for that?